or a grand romantic gesture, the kind you plan with anticipation, envisioning the look of shock and joy on your partner's face. That was the plan until it all went wrong. To the restaurant was a luxurious haven of soft lighting, elegant drapes, and the soft murmur of conversations blending with clinking wine glasses. Max had been thrilled to book the table with a view of the city's skyline, wanting to show Camille just how much he cared, especially after spending so much time at work. She had mentioned a dinner with friends, and what better way to surprise her than to show up at her favorite spot, unannounced? But instead of seeing Camille laughing with her girlfriends, he saw her with him. At a corner table near the window, his wife was there, her fingers brushing over the hand of a man Max didn't recognize. They leaned close, the intimacy between them unmistakable, cutting through the beautiful surroundings like a cruel joke. Max felt frozen, his body rejecting the reality his eyes fed him. He thought of all the things that could explain this. Maybe he was just imagining things, maybe it was a misunderstanding. Yet the softness in Camille's eyes, the way she leaned into the stranger's shoulder, was unmistakable. He had come to surprise her, and instead he was the one ambushed by a truth he wasn't ready to face. Max stood in the entrance of the restaurant, his feet cemented to the marble floor, as the scene played out before him. Camille, his wife, the woman he thought he knew inside and out, was sitting across from another man, smiling in that intimate way she used to smile at him. The flicker of candlelight caught her eyes as she laughed at something the stranger said, her hand lingering on his arm. For a brief moment, Max considered walking over, confronting them, demanding answers. His heart pounded in his chest, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Every muscle in his body screamed at him to storm up to their table, but something stopped him. The deep, gnawing instinct that told him not to make a scene. At least not yet. Instead, he slipped quietly into a booth by the bar, far enough away that he wouldn't be immediately noticed, but with a clear view of them. His hands trembled as he ordered drink, trying to keep his face neutral, trying not to let the bartender see the storm of emotions raging inside him. He clenched his fist under the table, nails digging into his palm as he watched his wife flirt with another man, a stranger in a tailored suit who oozed confidence. Camille looked radiant, more alive than she had seemed in months. That thought stung. He had been too focused on work, too caught up in late meetings and business deals. But he thought they were okay. Yes, things had been distant lately, her cold responses. The way she was always busy with friends, but Max had chalked it up to the normal ebbs and flows of marriage. Never had it crossed his mind that she might be seeking something or someone else. The drink came, but Max didn't touch it. His eyes never left them. Camille leaned closer to the man, her lips curving into that soft, private smile, the one she used to save for Max. The stranger whispered something in her ear, and she laughed, a light, carefree sound that twisted the knife in Max's chest. His pulse quickened, blood roaring in his ears as the minutes dragged on, each one more agonizing than the last. He tried to remember the last time she had laughed like that with him. Tried to recall the last time they had sat down for dinner, just the two of them, without their phones buzzing or his mind drifting to the office. When had he lost her? Max's mind raced, playing back the past year, or like a film on fast forward. The late nights she spent out with friends, the sudden bursts of enthusiasm about going to the gym, the new dresses she'd bought. He had been proud of her, proud of how she looked after herself, how she seemed to be finding joy in life again. But now all those memories had a new, sickening context. He had been blind. Willfully blind. Suddenly, Camille looked up. Their eyes met across the room, and Max's heart skipped a beat. For a second she froze, her face drained of all color. The man next to her kept talking, oblivious, but Camille was staring right at her husband, a look of sheer panic washing over her features. Max remained still, his eyes locked on hers, betraying nothing. Camille's lips parted, but no words came. So the world around them seemed to slow down, the rest of the restaurant fading into the background as they faced each other in silence. The truth hung heavy between them, undeniable and crushing. Max stood slowly, feeling every muscle in his body tense as he rose from his seat. I wasn't going to make the scene, not here, not now. Without a word, he turned and walked toward the exit, his heart splintering with every step. The life he thought he knew had just shattered in an instant. Max stepped out into the cool night air, his breath coming out in shallow, ragged bursts as the reality of what he had just witnessed settled over him. The lights of the city stretched out before him, but he could hardly see them through the blur of his emotions. His chest felt tight as though all the air had been sucked out of his lungs, and his mind was a storm of disbelief, anger, and deep, hollow sadness. For a moment he just stood there, rooted to the spot outside the restaurant, staring blankly at the rows of luxury cars parked along the curb. How had everything gone so wrong? He had planned to surprise her, to show her how much she still meant to him. Despite the long hours he worked, despite the stress that had been weighing him down. Instead, he had walked straight into the middle of her betrayal. He felt sick to his stomach. His legs wobbled slightly beneath him, as if the ground itself had shifted and he wasn't sure if he could trust his own feet anymore. Camille, his wife, had been sitting there with another man touching him, smiling at him in a way that Max hadn't seen in far too long. It was like a punch to the gut, and he still hadn't fully recovered from the blow. Max leaned against the wall of the restaurant, trying to collect himself. His thoughts raced back to all the moments he had ignored the small red flags that he had brushed aside because he didn't want to believe there was anything wrong. The late night she said she was spending with friends, the sudden flurry of gym visits, the new dresses. He had wanted to believe her, wanted to trust her completely. And she had played her part so well, never letting him see just how far things had unraveled. But now there was no denying it. The image of Camille sitting with that man, so comfortable and intimate with him, was burned into his mind. She had been leading a double life, hiding this from him while he worked himself to the bone to provide for their future. A future that now felt like it was crumbling to ashes. Max's hands clenched into fists at his sides, his anger bubbling up again, sharp and fierce. How could she do this to him? To their marriage? He had been working hard, sure, but it had been for them, for the life they had built together, for their future. He had never imagined that Camille would turn to someone else to fill the gap, to betray him like this. It felt like the ultimate insult, a knife in the back after years of loyalty. He glanced back at the restaurant's entrance, half expecting her to come rushing out after him, but she didn't. There was no sign of her, no hurried apology, no frantic attempt to explain. She was probably still sitting at that table with her lover, stunned by the sudden appearance of the one person she thought would never find out. But Max had found out. Now, the only thing that was clear to him was that nothing would ever be the same again. He had to leave, had to get away before the rage inside him erupted into something he couldn't control. He couldn't look at her, not now, not like this. He wasn't ready to confront her. Without a backward glance, Max started walking down the street, the chill of the evening air doing nothing to numb the burning ache inside his chest. The woman he had loved for so many years was gone, replaced by someone he no longer recognized. The question was, what was he going to do about it? Max wandered aimlessly through the quiet streets, his thoughts a tangled mess of betrayal and confusion. The night seemed colder now, the chill seeping into his bones, but he hardly noticed. His mind kept replaying the moment Camille's eyes met his, the shock and guilt that flashed across her face when she realized he had seen everything. That moment, that split second, had shattered the foundation of everything he believed in. His phone buzzed in his pocket, but he didn't reach for it. He knew it was Camille. She was probably texting him now, trying to explain herself, maybe even begging him to come back so they could talk. But Max wasn't ready to face her. The rage still bubbled too close to the surface, and he knew that if he saw her now, he wouldn't be able to contain it. The image of her sitting with that man, touching him, laughing with him, was still too raw. He needed space. He needed to think. The city around him seemed surreal, a blur of lights and distant sounds. He passed a row of high-end boutiques, their windows filled with glamorous displays. But all he could think about was the stark contrast between the luxury around him and the emptiness he felt inside. He had worked so hard for this life, sacrificed so much to give Camille everything she could ever want. But it hadn't been enough. Had he missed the signs? Maybe he had. Maybe he had been too absorbed in work, too distracted by his own responsibilities to notice that his marriage was crumbling beneath the surface. The thought gnawed at him, each revelation cutting deeper than the last. He had been blind, trusting, and perhaps too complacent. He had always believed that as long as he provided, as long as he was a good husband, everything would fall into place. But clearly that hadn't been enough for Camille. Max found himself in front of a small park, the kind with old-fashioned street lamps casting pools of golden light over the benches. He sank onto one, the weight of the night finally catching up with him. His body felt heavy, his limbs numb with exhaustion, but his mind was still spinning. How had it come to this? They had shared so much of home, dreams, memories. How could she throw it all away for some stranger? He stared down at his hands, the same hands that had held hers for so many years, that had helped build their life together. The betrayal felt deeply personal, as though Camille had not only betrayed their marriage, but also the very essence of who he was. She had been his partner, his confidant, the person he thought he could trust above all else. And now that trust was shattered. His phone buzzed again. He couldn't ignore it any longer. Reluctantly, Max pulled it from his pocket and looked at the screen. There it was, her name, Camille. "Max, please, we need to talk. I'm sorry. It's not what you think, Dot." He stared at the message, his mind swirling with conflicting emotions. Not what he thought. How could she even say that? He had seen it with his own eyes, the way she touched that man, the way she laughed with him. It was exactly what he thought. She had betrayed him, plain and simple. But then came the doubt, creeping in despite the anger. Could there be an explanation? Could it somehow be less sinister than it seemed? Max hated himself for even considering it, but after so many years together, it was hard to just turn off his feelings. Despite everything, a part of him still wanted to understand, still wanted to hear her side. His thumb hovered over the phone, hesitating. He could just walk away, block her out completely, and let the relationship dissolve into nothingness. Or he could go back, hear her out, and see if there was anything left to salvage. After a long pause, Max sighed deeply and typed a reply. "I don't know what there is to talk about, Camille. I saw enough. But I'll be home later, Dot." He hit send and stood up from the bench, feeling a fresh wave of exhaustion wash over him. The decision was made. He would go home. But what he would find there and whether there was anything left to save remained to be seen. Max's footsteps echoed softly against the pavement as he made his way back home. The walk felt longer than usual, each step weighed down by the dread of what awaited him. He had sent the message to Camille, agreeing to return, but now that the moment was approaching, uncertainty gnawed at him. What would he say? What could she possibly say that would undo the image burned into his mind? As he turned the corner onto their street, the familiar side of their house came into view. It was quiet, as it always was at this hour, but tonight it felt different, colder, emptier. The warm glow from the living room light spilled out onto the front lawn, but Max felt no comfort from it. The house that had once been his sanctuary now felt like a stage set for a confrontation he wasn't sure he was ready for. His fingers fumbled with the keys at the front door. For a moment he just stood there staring at the door handle, trying to steady his breathing. How had it come to this? A few hours ago he was planning a romantic evening, thinking he would surprise his wife and rekindle a spark. Now he was on the brink of a conversation that could end everything. Finally he pushed the door open and stepped inside. The house was eerily still, the ticking of the clock on the wall the only sound. Camille was sitting on the couch, her face pale, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. She looked up as he entered, her eyes wide with fear and something else, guilt. "Max," she started, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't expect you to come home so soon." He didn't respond right away. He just stood there taking her in, trying to reconcile the woman in front of him with the one he had seen earlier at the restaurant. Camille, who had once been the center of his world, now felt like a stranger. He couldn't shake the image of her with that other man, the way she had smiled at him as if Max didn't exist. "You didn't expect me to come home so soon?" Max repeated, his voice thick with disbelief. "I didn't expect to see my wife on a date with another man." Camille flinched, her hands twisting in her lap. "Max, please. It wasn't a date. It wasn't what you think." Max let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "Not what I think. Camille, I saw you. I saw the way you looked at him, the way you touched him. What am I supposed to think? That this is all some misunderstanding?" Tears welled up in Camille's eyes, and she wiped them away quickly. "I'm sorry, Max. I know how it looks, but it's complicated." Complicated. The word felt like a slap in the face. Complicated how? You're either cheating on me, or you're not? Which one is it? She opened her mouth to answer, but no words came. Instead, she dropped her gaze to the floor, the silence between them heavy and oppressive. Max's heart ached, torn between anger and the deep, painful love he still felt for her. He wanted to scream, to demand answers, but all that came out was a quiet, broken question. "Why, Camille? Why did you do this?" Camille's shoulders shook as the tears finally spilled over. "I don't know. I was lonely. You were always at work, and I felt forgotten. You made me feel alive again." Max swallowed hard, his throat tight. "And I didn't After all these years, I wasn't enough? Her eyes met his, full of regret. You are enough, Max. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. He stood there, letting her words sink in, the hurt swirling inside him. She had admitted it. The betrayal was real. And now they both had to face the consequences. Camille's face crumpled as Max's words hit her like a blow. She stood there, trembling, her hands clasped tightly in front of her as if holding herself together was the only thing keeping her from completely falling apart. Max could see the anguish in her eyes, the regret, but it wasn't enough to soothe the hurt burning inside him. The damage had been done, and no amount of apologies could take back what she'd done. I don't know if I can forgive you, he had said, and he meant it. Those words hung in the air between them, thick and suffocating, like the very walls of their home were closing in. Camille took a tentative step toward him, her voice breaking. Max, I'm so sorry. Please, just give me a chance to explain. Max's jaw tightened. Explain what, Camille? That you were lonely? That you needed attention? I've heard that already. His voice was cold, distant, and he hated how detached he sounded. But that was the only way he could protect himself from the tidal wave of emotions threatening to crash over him. It wasn't just that, she said, tears streaking down her cheeks. I didn't go looking for this. It just had happened. I was feeling so lost, like we weren't connecting anymore. Every night you were working late, always on your phone, always distracted. I started to feel invisible. Max closed his eyes, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He knew he had been absorbed in his work, consumed by the pressures of his job, but that didn't excuse what she had done. So you found someone else to make you feel visible? Camille winced. No, it wasn't like that. I didn't mean for it to go this far. It started with just talking. He was a friend, someone I could confide in, and then things just got out of control. Max's fists clenched at his sides, his body trembling with a mixture of rage and hurt. Out of control? You're telling me you accidentally ended up at a restaurant with him tonight, laughing like you were on some date? Her silence was answer enough. She hadn't planned on being caught. She hadn't expected him to show up, to see her with the man she had been sneaking around with for months. The thought made Max's stomach churn with disgust. I should have told you, Camille whispered, her voice shaking. I should have come to you, told you how I was feeling instead of letting it get to this point. But I was scared, Max, scared that you didn't love me anymore. Max turned sharply, his eyes narrowing. So you decided to test that theory by cheating on me? Camille's sobs grew louder, but Max couldn't stop now. The anger he had been trying to hold back for so long was finally spilling out, years of unspoken frustrations fueling the fire. You didn't even try to fix things, Camille. You didn't talk to me, you didn't fight for us. You just threw it all away. Her face was drenched in tears, her lips trembling as she tried to speak through the sobs. I thought I had already lost you. The words hung between them, raw and painful. Max's heart ached, but not for the reasons it once did. He ached for the years they had spent together, for the life they had built, and for the fact that it all seemed to be crumbling before his eyes. He ached for the love they had once shared, a love that now felt tainted and broken. Max shook his head, stepping back, distancing himself from her. You didn't lose me, Camille. You pushed me away. You made your choices. And now I have to make mine. Camille looked at him, her face pleading, her eyes wide with desperation. Max, please. But don't say that. We can fix this. I love you. I'll do anything to make this right. Max's chest tightened, but he couldn't ignore the overwhelming sense of betrayal coursing through him. I don't know if there's anything left to fix. With those words, Max felt the finality of it all sink in. Their marriage, their life together, it all felt like it was hanging by a thread. A fragile thread that had already frayed too much to ever be strong again.